Ms. Hassan Musa, you must just let me know when you would wish me to start speaking.
No, you can start. You can start. I'm pressing record as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Colleagues, thank you so much for waiting for us from the previous meeting in order to join this meeting. This is the Standing Committee on Education in the Western Cape. My name is Deirdre Bartman. I'm the chair for the committee. And today on our agenda, we are dealing with the briefing by the Western Cape Education Department on the National Schools Nutritional Program offered at schools in the Western Cape. I would like to obviously welcome all the members as well as the departmental officials. Colleagues, if you could please introduce yourselves, and then I'm going to allow the departmental officials to introduce themselves. The school nutritional program is part of previous resolutions that we are completing. Not only that the Education Committee previously resolved to engage in this subject matter, but even on a recent international study tour, we found that some countries have nutritional programs where it doesn't matter how poor or how rich you are, that you have access to a sandwich or some porridge or something in your belly on a school day. And it's thus important for us to also then see where and how we would like to incorporate some of those matters within a South African and particularly within a Western Cape context. Thank you so much. Members, you may introduce yourselves.
Member Fry. Phil Christians.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chair. Christopher Fry.
Good afternoon, Chair. Khalid Sayed.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, all the members. Khalil Brankes.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair. Mesuli Kamla.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dan Plato.
Afternoon. I don't see any other members, so I'm just going to ask if the department can introduce themselves. Mr. Lewis, are you present?
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Yeah, Archie Lewis. And I've got one of my colleagues in the meeting, Ms. Sopotela. Maybe Ms. Sopotela, could you do the necessary?
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Linda Sopotela. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful having you here today. You can jump straight into the presentation, and we're going to do questions and answers after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst Ms. Sopotela will try to flight the presentation, just a little bit of context. The feeding scheme is not something new. I think the feeding scheme in schools was there before 94 and it continued after 94. However, there are some changes that have been effected to the school feeding system. For example, in our province, by legislation and by the Division of Revenue Act, school feeding is mandatory for all quintiles 1 to 3 schools. It's mandatory. Be it a primary school or a high school. Now, what happened before 94 in this province is that all of your primary schools under the House of Reps made use of or had the benefit of the feeding scheme. Now, after 94, with the introduction of the quintile system, some of those schools were excluded. As I say, currently, as per the Division of Revenue Act, it's mandatory for quintiles 1 to 3 schools. Now, a large majority of your schools under the ex-House of Reps.
I apologize for interrupting you.
Yes, ma'am.
I do know that you had a presentation that you sent to us, and I wasn't sure now if I'm the only one who's not seeing the presentation on the screen. Oh, perfect. There we go. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. Therefore, some of the ex-HOR schools have been excluded because of the prescripts in the Division of Revenue Act. But we were successful as a province to get permission from DBE to cover a large portion of those schools. But that was made possible by making use of the same grant that was given to us by DBE or National Treasury. The lady that's managing the program in the province is Ms. Lindelwa Sopotela, and she will do the presentation. Just to say at this stage, we think we are doing fairly well, except for the fact that the majority of your quintile 4 schools, not the majority, almost all of them, are still schools that's located in relatively poor locations, and the current economic situations is further complicating the situation. So many poor children whom we will regard should actually be benefiting from the feeding scheme are excluded, and that is something that we are trying to work on as a department. Having given you that context, Chair and members, I'll ask now Mr. Patela to take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. My presentation, I'm not sure, members, if it's on full screen on your side.
It is still on the first slide with the heading on it.
Okay, thank you. The overview of the presentation will cover the background of the National School Nutrition Program, together with the budget that is allocated, the National School Nutrition Program beneficiaries, contracted service providers, National School Nutrition pillars, the roles and responsibilities at head office, district office, and at school level. The standard operating procedures, as well as the achievements and challenges that we encounter within the program. Looking at the background, education is one of the social rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights. However, given the prevalence of poverty in communities across the country, the learning process in school tends to be negatively influenced by factors such as malnutrition, stunting, and wasting. It was against this background that the democratic government established the primary school nutrition program in schools in 1994. The background continues. The Department of Health managed the program until 2004. It was then relocated to the Department of Basic Education. NSNP is funded by National Treasury through a conditional grant to feed 9.6 million needy children a meal every school day. The National Treasury allocated 8.5 billion in conditional grant transfers to provinces to the school nutrition program in the 2022-2023 financial year. The next slide shows the budget for 2022-2023. The allocated budget in the Western Cape, it is 451,289,000. The benefiting schools, it is 1,024 schools. Beneficiaries, total number of learners that are benefiting out of the program, it's 507,332. The budget weighting. Prescribed weighted budget allocation for primary, secondary, and special schools. For feeding, it is 97%, and this 97% comprises of feeding, honoraria, as well as fuel. 2.4% is for administration, 0.4% is for kitchen facilities, equipment, and utensils. And the last 2% is allocated for nutrition education, including deworming and hygiene practices.
Ms. Sopotela,
I'm trying to get, yes, I'm trying to get a next slide.
No problem, I wasn't sure.
Okay. In terms of average cost per learner, the current average cost per meal for the WCED, primary and special schools, we've got in quintile 1 to 3, we are paying 3.40 cents. Quintile 4 to 5 in primary, in secondary, we are paying 2.61. Secondary schools, quintiles 1 to 3, we are paying 3.87 cents per learner per day. In quintiles 4 to 5 secondary, we are paying 2.84 cents. WCD beneficiaries, quintiles 1 to 3 schools, we've got 527 schools. The benefiting learners is 3,982. In quintile 4 to 5, we've got 283 schools, which is primary. The beneficiaries is 71,309. Secondary schools in quintile 1 to 3, we've got 120. Benefiting learners, it's 113,066. In secondary schools, we've got 44 schools. Learners that are benefiting is 9,336. The last group of schools, it is the special schools. We've got 50 schools where it's about 12,639 learners that are benefiting. We have contracted service providers. WCED follows a centralized model. An open tender system is applied and service providers are contracted for a period of 2 years. 3 service providers are contracted, namely Baldwin for Eden Central Karoo, Overberg and West Coast District. The second service provider is Mukashelwa for Cape Winelands District, and Peninsula School Feeding Association is responsible for the Metro District, which is Central, East, North and South. The service providers supply the schools directly with food stock. We also have 3 pillars of the NSNP: the school feeding, the nutrition education and deworming, and sustainable food production. Under school feeding provides nutritious meals to all learners in quintiles 1 to 3 primary and secondary schools, as well as identified special schools for all school days. Also provide nutritious meals to learners in selected quintiles 4 to 5 schools for 190 days. School feeding continues. Approved menu. The approved menu consists of meals containing 1, the starch, consists of fortified maize meal, samp and rice. Protein consists of lentils, sugar beans, soya, pilchards, and chicken livers, and milk once a week. Fresh and vegetables and/or fruit a day, butternut, carrots, cabbage, and fruit in season. The second pillar is the nutrition education and deworming, which educates learners and the community about good nutrition, creating awareness about deworming campaign. The last leg is about the sustainable food production, which facilitates the establishment of food gardens and other food production projects at schools. In the Western Cape Education Department, we've got 571 schools with gardens, appointed 146 gardeners. Coming to the roles and responsibilities at head office is to develop and submit approved business plans to the DBE, monitor and provide support to districts and schools, manage and implement the program in line with the 2022 Division of Revenue Act and the Public Finance Management Act. Update and submit database on kitchen facilities, equipment, and utensils to DBE. Ensure that districts are resourced in line with provincial business plans to conduct effective monitoring and support to schools. Roles and responsibilities continue at head office to implement monitoring and evaluation plans, to provide human resource capacity at all relevant levels, to evaluate the performance of the conditional grant annually and submit evaluation reports to the DBE, to submit quarterly financial and performance reports, including consolidated monitoring, reporting, and response system reports to DBE. The roles and responsibilities at the district level is to monitor and support the schools, submit monthly and quarterly reports. This includes consolidated monitoring, reporting, and response system reports. Coordinate all the National School Nutrition Program activities at school level in the district. The roles and responsibilities at the school level is to implement the program in line with the conditions of the National School Nutrition Program framework, submit reports to districts as per the provincial reporting requirements, to safeguarding of program resources, that is cooking facilities, equipment, and utensils. The standard operating procedure. The standard operating procedure provides guidelines for the preparation of the NSNP business plan on school feeding for implementation, to monitor the implementation of NSNP at school level, examination of financial reporting, procurement of NSNP school feeding goods and services, monitoring of reporting to the districts, processing of the NSNP employment of volunteer food handlers, developing and monitoring volunteer food handlers attendance register. Coming to the achievements, the money was transferred to all the NSNP beneficiary schools in order to purchase new kitchen equipment. For example, electrical ends, pots, plates, spoons, and cutlery in 2021-22 and 22-23 financial year. And coming to the challenges is to expand the program to include all learners in quintile 4 to 5 schools, because in quintile 4 to 5 schools, not all schools are beneficiaries. It's only a targeted number of learners, which is 40% of the learners are beneficiaries. Lack of appropriate storage facilities at our schools. Most of our schools, the kitchens are in the mobile mode, and we don't have storages. We've got cupboards within the kitchen, and you find that the facilities are not adequate enough. Burglaries and theft is rife in some areas, especially in the metro districts. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sopotela. That's been quite a comprehensive presentation, and it's made me quite optimistic this afternoon. Members, I'm going to open up for the question round now. Member Christian, Member Fry, Member Syed, in that order. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentation. Just questions as follows. Some of the quintile 4 and 5 schools are not receiving feeding because it's not mandatory according to the school feeding. So only it's from quintile 1 to 3. So I want to know how do you come to the decision quintile 4 to 5 they are schools that are in needy areas, children that need food. How do you come to that decision to include some schools and not the other? Because it's not mandatory. Of course, I know there's a budget, but how do you determine which school is in the quintile 4 to 5 is needed and not needed? The second question, Chair, is there was some time ago, long time ago, there was in the media reports of, food that had expiry dates on, and that was quite big in the media. Who makes sure that pupils don't receive food that has expired? And maybe just the last question, I saw the one on the food gardens. So we've been to a couple of schools where there's food gardens. So I see there's 571 food gardens with 146 gardeners. Is there a program to encourage schools to have food gardens so that, pupils can be proud of the vegetables they grow? Because we also know in certain schools, there is a stigma attached if you receive food. Some people don't want to receive food because there's a stigma attached to that. So maybe when we, go when pupils go out and they're actually involved in vegetable gardens, it maybe change that perception. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Member Fry.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got 3 questions that I'd like to post. The first, on your allocation slide, I think it is slide number, I'm just getting there quickly. Slide number 6. Your percentages don't add up. 97 plus 2.4 plus 0.4 plus 2 is not 100%. It's a bit more. So I'd like to have some clarity on that. And then your division of funds to the 3 service providers. Could we have a bit of an idea as to how much each service provider gets? Because that leads on to my third question, is that the Provincial School Feeding Association ran a fundraising initiative with a local radio station in the metro, actually a Western Cape station, and they raised over 20 million rand in one day. My question is, why would they need to raise 20 million when they're getting all of this money from the department? And what is the monitoring and evaluation of that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Member Syed.
Chair, thank you very much. And especially the second part of Member Fry's question covers me largely. But I just wanted to get a sense on slide number 8, if I could get a sense as to, is there a standardized menu for all schools? Because we visited schools with Member Bartman, including with Member Botha before, where we've seen different menus. But I just wanted to get a sense, is there a standardized menu for all schools? Are quintile 1 to 3 schools enjoying or having the same meals as quintile 4 to 5 schools? Also, what considerations are made for learners who cannot eat certain foods because of allergies and those who are vegetarians, Then, still keeping on to slide 8, given the socioeconomic profiles of various communities and given the fact that these have changed, are there more quintile 4 to 5 schools that are applying for the conditional grant? And what process do they need to follow? Can I ask on one more slide, Member Bartman, or must I come back later?
Member Syed, ask all of your questions.
Okay.
I like to be comprehensive so that when the speaker comes back, then you might have a follow-up. So rather ask
that's
all
good.
now.
Then we've got good freedom here. For how many years, this is on slide number 9, for how many years have these service providers been contracted to the department? And will there be a new tender advertised? Can you also perhaps share with us details of board members of some of the service providers and their triple BEE status? Then also, just to explain, in fact, I received a question this morning from members of the public when they saw that we're having this meeting. There was in Kraaifontein. How do local businesses that are situated close to the school communities, that are part of school communities, how do they benefit from this opportunities? We know essentially learners must be fed, but of course, we're looking at a whole society approach here. Then slide number 14. Could you possibly give us some more details regarding the project? Okay, that's fine. I think I'm covered there, but it is a food gardens, I remember Christians. Slides 15 to 18, in terms of incidences of corruption, have there been any of these incidences which have been picked up or reported? And what mechanisms are in place to prevent the stealing of groceries and equipment? And who is responsible for that task? Then finally, on slide number 21, could the department perhaps expand on the challenge that they're having to expand the program to all quintiles 4 to 5 schools, and how we can work together to ensure that that is achieved? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Because some members have covered some of my questions, I just want to make some comments and with my questions then, because I don't think it will necessarily add to the question limit. Member Christians made a good point regarding the stigma attached to receiving food. And Member Side also spoke about the standardized menu. So I wanted to find out, I don't necessarily think that every school must make the same food. However, some schools I do know don't necessarily have the, one could say, expertise to put a program together that is nutritious. So in that regard, do you have a standard template perhaps that you give to schools as to, this is recommended food or menus to make if you don't know what to make? I know one school, a principal was very involved that where we did oversight, and the principal was very involved in ensuring that the children had nutritious meals, and sometimes he even took recommendations from the children to make sure that they are happy and that they're able to have quality education, not have to worry about food in their tummies. And then the fresh fruit and vegetables, I wanted to find out how frequently are those delivered? Is it every day? Is it every week? Yes. And then in terms of the quintile 4 and 5 schools, now in this committee, we have had comments and opinions and questions regarding the review of the quintile system, because many children don't necessarily have the same wealth as the school that they are placed in, which means that obviously in quintile 4 and 5, there may be children who do qualify for the scheme, but then do not receive a nutrition program at that school simply because the school is classified in that particular quintile. And I wanted to find out whether the department would consider expanding the scheme to quintile 4 and 5 if possible. I know it's based on national establishments, but if we can expand it to quintiles 4 and 5, and in particular, if it's not possible to expand it to the full school, if we could at least expand it so that those quintiles have enough to cater for the persons who are qualifying within those schools. And then I also wanted to find out, we heard from some schools that if you are a new school, so you just recently built your school, and now you have children and they come into the school, what some of those schools don't want to do is they don't want to immediately let the department know how many children they have in the school, because the amount of money apparently that you get for the nutrition program is based on how many children are in the school. And one principal indicated that they expect the school numbers to increase because they are a relatively new school. But if they let the department know now how many children they have in the school, then they won't be able to change the allocation they get in the future. So if I have 10 children this year, I will get money for 10 children. But if I have 20 children next year, I will still get money for 10 children. So I wanted to find out if that is the case. Is it not possible for the WCED to work on a formula where we can ask for the money in this particular program from the national department to ensure that as the number of children in the school increase over time, that the allocation matches the children, the amount of children in the school? I'm going to leave my questions there because that's a bit of a mouthful. Member Brinkhuis, and then I'm going to close this round of questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, Chair, and also thank you very much for the department for the presentation. My question is a very simple question through you, Chair, that I just want to ascertain that in terms of the Muslim learners spread all over the province, how much importance or consideration is given to the food being served to Muslim learners, that food being halal and being halal and proper for the Muslim learners to consume. Yes, that is just a very general question that I want to ask from the department, and if the department can respond to that. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much for that question, Member Brinkhuis. And maybe Ms. Sopatela, maybe if you can include things on that, and if learners have allergies and other dietary requirements, what does the department do in that regard? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. That was more than a mouthful of questions. But between Mr. Potela and myself, we will try to respond to it. If we miss some of your questions, please remind us so that we can try and deal with it. Otherwise, if we don't get to it, Chair, if you can as a committee put it in some communication to us so that we deal with it. While Mr. Potela is thinking, let me try to respond to a few of the questions. The question of member Christians about what criteria do the department use to determine which quintile 4 and 5 schools must be included. That was an easy decision to make, Chair. As I've indicated, before the introduction of the NSNP, our schools, especially schools in our colored communities under the House of Reps, had feeding as a benefit to them. And when the requirement came in that only quintile 1 and 3 schools qualify, as a department, we thought it wise that we cannot take away that food from those schools and children because they got used to it. And therefore, at that stage, all the quintile 4 and 5 schools that benefited from the previous feeding scheme were automatically then included in the system, and that is how they are still there. We are trying to expand it, but not with a lot of success. But that is how those schools then were identified and continue to benefit from the feeding scheme. The expiration of food, I think Mr. Podella can speak to those logistics. Honorable Member Fry asked about the allocation that doesn't add up to 100%. I checked it again, and it adds up to 100% unless I'm missing something. He also raised the issue of the Peninsula feeding scheme that raised 20 million rand.
Apologies, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah.
On the percentage, if we can just go to that slide quickly, because 2 + 2 is 4. And 4 plus 97 is already over 100. Can we just quickly go to that slide?
No, okay.
That one.
Okay,
No, let's go back.
Yeah, the last one should
There we
not be 2. It should be 0.2. Sorry.
So the nutrition education needs to be 0.2.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I just want to make sure, because otherwise there's going to be a follow-up on that. Thanks.
Yeah. No. My apology, Honorable Fry. My mathematics at this time of the day is a little bit out. The feeding scheme, over and above the 1,024 schools that we are feeding as a department, there are other schools in the system who's also making use of feeding, but that is through voluntary processes by the private sector. And the Provincial feeding scheme, although they are one of our service providers, also provide food on a voluntary basis to other schools that do not fall under the feeding scheme. And I suspect that the raising of funds is to help those schools that we do not reach, that they can then reach. But those schools are mostly located within the metro, and it doesn't reach, or they do not reach the schools especially in our rural setups. Then Honorable Syed asked the question whether quintile 4 and 5 schools apply. We do get regular applications from schools, but it's very difficult for us to include them in the feeding scheme, and it basically has to do with funding. Someone else asked, how do we include these schools? The only way that we can include these schools, I don't think will be through the grant. It will perhaps be if, as a province, there could be a provincial equitable share funding allocated to the feeding scheme. In other words, a top up to the grant that could enable us then to feed all the learners in all the schools. Let me just see. Yeah, maybe, and Chair, you mentioned the issue of the revision of the quintile system. That will definitely help. If the quintile system is removed, I think that will level the playing field for the feeding scheme, and maybe then force National Treasury through DBE to feed as many children as possible. Mr. Patela, can you come into some of these questions? I know before you come in, someone asked, I think it was Honorable Syed asked, what amount of money do we spend on each of the service providers? That is unfortunately something that we cannot give you now, but in writing we can give you that information. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Patela.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I think you have covered some of the questions, and I will go to those that need specifications. In terms of the food expiry dates, we've got district officials, which is the district coordinator, as well as the field workers, 2 per district, but pending to the size of the district. And their responsibility is to monitor the schools on a daily basis, which is the field worker must visit the schools daily, and each school is supposed to be visited quarterly. So when the service provider supplies the food, the requirement is that that particular item should have 6 months shelf life. And as well, at school level, there is a one teacher that is nominated to be a school NSNP coordinator. That NSNP coordinator assists the volunteers to manage the program at school level. And one of the functions is to look at the food that is in the storeroom. And we say it should be first in, first out. But at times, we do have some food that expire. The reason caused by, you'll find that sometimes schools inflate the numbers. Not all learners are eating on the school nutrition program, but because they are quintile 1 to 3, they qualify for 100%, and you find that the numbers are not accurate enough, and hence we end up with stockpiling. In terms of the food gardens, yes, we've got 571 gardens in the program, and 146 gardeners are paid through the EPWP funding. But also, we are now working closely with the curriculum section so that the gardens are integrated into the curriculum. And the learners must use the gardens as laboratories. And in that manner, we are hoping that it will also encourage learners to take maybe agriculture as a learning subject, or also participate into the program. Mr. Lewis referred to the issue of the money, but maybe it would help to know that out of the 3 service providers, we've got Baldwin. Baldwin covers ECK, Overberg, and West Coast. They cover 328 schools. Mukashelwa, they cover Cape Winelands, which has got 217 schools. Then PSFA covers the Metro. They've got 479 schools. The menu is standard. We've got a menu that is standard menu, and that menu is guided by the DORA, which is there are certain conditions that we apply as set out by the Division of Revenue Act. So it is difficult to change or to maneuver, because all those items that are mentioned there under the feeding, the starch, what we offer under starch, what we offer under proteins and the fresh vegetables and the fruit. So we've got a standard menu for all the children. But in some schools, we do have an uncooked menu, which has got a sandwich, because the deep rural schools will find that it's very difficult to implement this menu, and therefore they opt for an uncooked menu. If those children have got allergies, then we say, especially in the case of fish, because that's the one common item, you find that the learners have got a problem. Then the learners, they don't eat fish, but we've got fish together with lentils on a Monday. That's the consideration we have, and probably the consideration that we can afford. How many years the current service providers have been contracted? The contract was awarded in 2016, and it was supposed to expire in 2018. However, there were changes in the menu and also challenges with the contract, to award the contract at the time in 2018. And then the contract was then extended. And again, in 2020, there were some other challenges that developed. I don't have those specifications now, which led the contract to be extended to expire 2022, September 30th, September 2022. The local business benefit, it's difficult, that one, because it is an open tender system, and all people are encouraged to apply. So in an open tender system and a centralized model, then it's difficult to say, do we look at the local businesses to benefit? Instances of corruption and theft, we do have instances, but they are not in large numbers. And we say the school principal, together with the governing body, they manage the governance of the school, and they are the ones that employ the volunteer food handlers. So whoever steals the food, whether it's the teacher or is the volunteer food handler, then the SGB must be involved and the principal must report that incident. If you get someone, it must be reported to the police. I think I talked about the standardized menu in terms of preparation of the meals to see the quality of the food that is prepared. The volunteer food handlers, they get training, and even national, they've got a training on the preparation of meals. So our volunteer food handlers are trained on preparation of meals. They are trained on the use of gas and also the hygiene. The fruit and vegetables is distributed once per week. And then we've got veg on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On the day that there is no veg that is supplied, we've got a fruit, which is once a week on Tuesdays. Mr. Lewis talked to the review of the quintiles, but I want to stress to the members that the quintile 4s and 5s that are benefiting in the program, they are not funded. When National Treasury makes allocation, they only take numbers of quintiles 1 to 3 learners. And therefore, the 4s and 5s are not added on the allocations. However, in the Western Cape, there are 2 provinces that are able to feed quintile 4s and 5, which is Western Cape and Gauteng. Because not all learners are eating, you find that 100% of learners are not eating. Maybe it's 80% that are eating in a school, so there's 20% that is not eating. That allows us to have savings. And that money, it is the one that is allocated towards the quintile 4s and 5s. Also, the issue of 10 learners benefiting this year, and then you are supposed to increase it to 20 learners. The challenge is that when a school is classified as quintile 4, they don't qualify. Then the school must apply to be a no-fee school. The number that is calculated, that 40% is calculated on the number that you give us. If that number increases in the following year, then we cannot afford. As I've indicated, there is no additional funding that is coming for the quintile 4s and 5. The last question, I hope I've covered all. For the Muslim learners, is it the consideration for halal? The only thing that is a myth in our program, which is new, because we've got canned chicken livers, but we have verified, we have seen the certificate, the company has got a halal certificate. So we don't have challenges with other food items because it's not meat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Sapotel, I just wanted to check, you mentioned, so if I'm a new school, just built, I have 10 learners this year, I'm classified as quintile 4, then next year, if 15 children come to my school, then I can still only get for those 10 learners because that's how I'm classified in terms of the quintile.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I heard that correct.
Yes, if you give us 200 learners, we then calculate 40% of that 200, which means you are going to get food for 80 learners. So when your numbers increase to 500, we don't have funds that are available to increase the number of learners. And even the issue of no fee consideration, it's quite recent, because the only number that benefited is that number that was transferred from the Department of Health, the one that Mr. Lewis was referring to. For quite a number of time, we only had about 307 schools that were beneficiaries. But because now the schools changed their status to be a no fee, once you become a no fee, you automatically qualify, but you only qualify for target learners, and that target learners is 40%.
Okay, thank you so much. Members, I'm going to open up for a second round of questions. I'm sure there's lots of follow-ups. If none, I will go first then. Okay, I wanted to, okay, Member Kama. And then Member Syed. You can go in that order. I'll go after Member Syed.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me welcome the responses. I just want to get a clarity, Chair, in terms of follow up. I think the department mentioned that in terms of the food that expires, it mentioned that in other cases it's because there are people who would have not I mean there are schools, sorry about that, there are schools who inflate their numbers and then they would now have stockpiling which will then lead to food that expires. Now I want to understand what is being done by the department to respond to that so that we're able to try and ensure that we don't have food that expires when we still talk about a greater need that is there in terms of the learners in our province, regardless of the quintile they find themselves in. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Member Syed.
Chair, thank you very much, and thank you to the department for the responses, the comprehensive responses. My follow-up is on the tendering issue. Can I get a sense as to how many times was the contract extended, and was this lawful? That's number one. What are the chances that that the contract may again be extended in September when it expires? And what work has been done to get new service providers? The other issue I'll get to in the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think Member Syed covered one question I wanted to ask. I want to take it a little bit further. I wanted to find out. So you said it's an open tendering system. I do know when the Minister of Education was Minister of Finance, he put forward a suggestion that the regulation 16B, if I remember correctly now, is reviewed so that the Department of Education and Department of Health are able to deal with their own infrastructure as well, and not only the Department of Public Works. So I want to take that principle a bit further. I want to ask, is it not possible that instead of having a centralized tendering system for the NSNP program, is it not possible to take that principle and try and find out whether schools are able to essentially purchase their own food? There was one school, for example, where they built a mobile classroom, but it was almost 6 times less than what they would have paid for if it had to go through the tendering system, because compliance is expensive. So my question then is would it then not reduce the amount of money we'd be spending on purchasing food for schools? The schools will also be able to then manage their own food, which might be able to bring the expiration of the foods, decrease the amount of food that expires. But then it might also assist in increasing the volume of food, as well as supporting local businesses and farmers and fruit producers and service providers in the area. One would think that if you live in the area, you would know more or less what the price of food in that area would be and how much you can get it for, and where you can stretch the sense as far as possible so that you can feed as many mouths as possible. So if not, would it not be possible to perhaps consider a framework agreement where you would then have an agreement for, let's say, 3 or so years, but because you have vetted all the various service providers, you would be able to rotate between the respective service providers? I'm not sure how logistically feasible that may be, but if you can just indicate to us whether there may be some appetite for such an arrangement. And then finally, I wanted to find out, the gardens, you indicated that 571 gardens has been established. And I know, for example, that the Department of Agriculture has indicated one household, one garden. And I wondered if we shouldn't start thinking about a similar principle in education with the support of the Department of Agriculture, one school, one garden. So that not only are we able to perhaps save on some of the fresh vegetable and fruit items, but perhaps we would also be able to then use that to educate our learners for the agricultural curriculum. Thank you so much.
Chair, let me try the first step, and Mr. Potela can add. The point raised by Honourable Member Kama about the expired food and the inflation of numbers is perhaps not as simple as what Mr. Potela has indicated. Let's take, for an example, quintile 1, 2, or 3 schools sitting with 1,200 learners. By law, we are supposed to give them or to feed all 1,200 learners. But in practice, we know that some of the learners do not eat at school for whatever reason. And therefore, we ask these schools, especially the schools within quintiles 1 to 3, to give us an indication of how many of your learners make use of the feeding scheme daily. Now, it is in that number that the schools or some schools are not giving us an honest reflection of that number. And when a school of 1,200 learners tells us that only 1,000 learners eat per day, then we will inform the service provider servicing that school that you just need to provide food for 1,000 learners. But in practice, if only 800 learners eat per day, it means that you are sitting with 200 additional meals at that school that's not consumed. And that is where the issue comes in of food that gets expired, because the school themselves then prepare less food per day. We ask our field workers, to monitor these schools closely, because what can happen is if a school is sitting with 1,200 learners and only 800 learners eat, then it means there are 400 meals that we can distribute amongst non-qualifying quintile 4 and 5 schools. So it's an ongoing exercise, but it's also an exercise where, as the department, we don't want to be finger pointed to say, but you are supposed to give us this, but you are not giving us. You're supposed to give us X, but you are giving us X minus something. So it's a difficult one, but I believe if we can beef up the system, we can perhaps feed more learners in our quintile 4 and 5 schools. That's the one thing that I want to mention, Chair. The issue of the centralized and decentralized model. There are provinces who are making use of the decentralized model. They're not giving the money directly to the schools to buy. They are using their district offices to do the provisioning. It would perhaps be good for the standing committee, to visit 1 or 2 of these districts and investigate how this model is operating. Mr. Patella will tell you she's attending the national meetings, and when one listens to the challenges that provinces have with a decentralized model, yeah, then we rather opt for the centralized model, which is not the perfect model. One's logic tells you that if we can develop a system where we could channel the funding directly to the school. That will ultimately be the best model. But I think our democracy is too young to go that route, Chair. That's my own opinion. We can see it in our no-fee schools, where our no-fee schools receive up to 200 and more than, no, up to 2 million and more than 2 million rand per annum just in norms and standards. And the management of that funds at school, you know, and so on, to disseminate 451 million rand into the system. Yeah, that I hope that as a department, they will get there one day. I won't be around anymore. But that would be the best, because then a school, knowing its own school community and knowing its own service providers or businesses that supports the school, can then optimally utilize that funds to provide food to the school, and in the same time, and again, that's my opinion, by doing that, it can increase parental and community involvement into that school, and perhaps increase the level of pride in that school, and also the sense to protect that school in the community. It can yield a lot of benefits, but I think we are not, as a community, ready yet to go that route, but that is eventually what should be happening. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Sopatela, can you add?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lewis. On the issue of inflated numbers, for us as a program to manage that space, we always say when the numbers increase or decrease, the school must fill in a verification form. And we update our numbers to the service providers on a fortnightly basis, so that we know exactly how many learners must be fed. However, most of the schools that have, as Mr. Lewis has explained, as the quintals 1 and 3 that have got stockpiling, we then redistribute the food to the quintal 4s to 5, because there's always a need. It's easy in the metro, but it is difficult in the rural areas. One, there are not many quintal 4 to 5 in the rural. Most of the schools, they are falling under quintal 1 to 3. The other question was around how many times this tender has been extended. The first time the tender was awarded in 2016, expired in 2018. It was then extended for another 2 years, expired in 2020, then extended for another 2 years. The tender process now, it's the supply chain is busy with the evaluation of the tender. And the last time I got the report is that they are on phase 3 of the evaluation. We are hoping that this process will be finalized soon, but looking at the time, the tender is not awarded as yet. The decentralized, Mr. Lewis talked to that one. Each and every model, which is the centralized and decentralized, it has got its merits and demerits. And if you are going to opt for a centralized model, you must have a lot of officials who are doing the monitoring. And the schools must be in a position to manage their own funds and be able to report. The other possibility was the framework that could be developed so that the service providers rotate. And I think that can be taken as a recommendation to the managers that are dealing with procurement. With the issue of food gardens, that one school, one garden, this function, as much as it is one of the pillars of NSNP, it is not funded anymore. It used to have funds from the conditional grant there was a certain percentage, that is 0.4%, which goes now towards nutritional education and deworming. It used to be funded under that. But when deworming came, then the gardens were no longer funded. So it makes it so difficult to establish new gardens on the basis that we don't have funds. We simply rely on partnerships and the networking that we are doing. Sorry, we are working closely with the Department of Agriculture as well as the EPWP. But out of the grant itself, we don't have funds. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you so much. I think off the top of my head, there are a few things that have been mentioned that I think that we need to make recommendations to the Budget Committee and Provincial Treasury as to what we need to take up in the upcoming Division of Revenue adjustment process. But colleagues, I'm going to open up hands now again because we do have some time. I have also 1 or 2 follow-up questions, but members can raise their hands now. Member Karma. Okay, I'll go after Member Karma then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to Mr. Lewis for that response. And I understand the issue of what is prescribed in terms of the law and not wanting to push schools. But what I want to then understand is that has this been put to schools themselves, you know, as a question of nobility, you know, within the confines that we understand that the law says supposedly you are supposed to fund, feed everyone that is in that quintile. But there is this question of other learners that we've been using the space of, you know, engagements around the second managers to put that question to schools themselves, and this will help, you know, creating that relationship amongst schools themselves, and will even help us in other challenges. So I just wanted to put that point, Chair, because for me, in this question is that even if you were to decentralize the system, the system of sourcing of the food, and give to the schools to source the food, the allocation that will be given to the schools again would have to be controlled by a system that says how many learners do you feed. So if even at that stage they still inflate the numbers such that at the end we have a possibility of food that expires, we'll still have that challenge even then. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Member Syed.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just just a bit concerned. If the tender has not been awarded yet, what are the chances of the contract being extended again? Also, when was the process started and how long does it usually take? It is something that is easy to acceptable for 2-year contracts to be extended by 4 years. I'm just a bit concerned, you know, and how much is awarded per service provider? So it's a bit concerning. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think we can ask for that extra detail also in writing, so that it's if we get that, then we can also be able to monitor the upcoming process as well. My follow-up, I've already mentioned, I do think that the fact that the grant does not fund the gardens anymore from the Division of Revenue, that we need to possibly consider taking that to the Division of Revenue adjustment period, because it's easy for us as a country to say that we want food security, but one of the first things that we cut from a national level is money for food gardens. It doesn't make sense. Then in terms of the possibility of a framework agreement, I'm happy to propose that later in the resolutions that we look at finding out whether there is appetite for framework agreements in this regard from the department. But what I wanted to find out is, you mentioned that there are, Mr. Lewis mentioned there are some challenges in other provinces with the decentralized model. What are those particular challenges? And perhaps instead of decentralizing completely, what one could do is, similar to the coding and robotics clubs and programs in the WCED, perhaps the department can do a pilot where those schools who are doing well and are managed well are incentivized. And essentially, the better you manage your school, the more incentives you receive. And perhaps one of those incentives is that because you have proven that you are a well-managed school, that you are able to run your own decentralized food procurement as well. I know I'm a professor from Stellenbosch, and a few other international professors actually wrote for the UN a document on the decentralization of food procurement for some countries. And something, for example, in Brazil that works well is that decentralization of the food procurement. But I completely understand that some schools do not necessarily have the capacity to take it on just yet. So what would the appetite perhaps be to then almost phase it in or phase it out and to scale in those particular incentives? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask Mr. Patella to speak about the pros and cons of centralized and decentralized models. Just to say that to Member Kama, yes, it is possible that we can write to schools in a general circular and request schools to provide us with feeding data, or the data that they provide be as accurate as possible to advantage and benefit the other schools who are not part of the program. We can do something like that. Then, Chair, your own question about to run a pilot, that's a brilliant idea. But even to run a pilot, one should perhaps consider, and that is where the standing committee can assist us, if we can convince Provincial Treasury to set aside equitable share funding, because we cannot run the pilot within our centralized model within the division of revenue confines. I would think that if we get some funding separately, let's say if we can get $1 million or $500,000 of rand ring-fenced for the purpose of a pilot, to run a pilot in the province with a few schools and to experiment what optimal option can we utilize, and perhaps then after that pilot, feed that pilot data into the national environment and so on, to take a final decision. That's possible. Mr. Patella?
Currently, Mr. Lewis, that's why I was saying both models, you'll find that there are merits into each, but those provinces that are transferring directly to the schools, currently they are having problems with the reporting and the accountability of the schools. And most of the time, they don't meet the deadlines to submit to DPE, and you'll find that funds are held against the province because they are not complying in terms of reporting. So that is very common with the decentralized. But in some schools, it really works well because the principal will have the competency, or the school itself, the management will have the competency of managing the funds. So I think the blended model as proposed by the chairperson, it's something that could be looked at, and also look at the increasing of the officials who will monitor. Because once you've got a decentralized model, it means you're giving power to the schools to manage their funds, but also as the department, you must be able to to have to strengthen your monitoring and evaluation. Thank you.
Just the question from Member Syed wasn't answered yet. The contracts, the chances of the contracts being extended.
I think Mr. Lewis can respond on that one.
Now, if our supply chain management unit doesn't conclude these contracts by the end of September, then obviously it will have to be extended. One always take your hint from the service that needs to be rendered. We cannot stop rendering the service to our schools because of the inability to conclude a contract at this level, and therefore I foresee that if the contract is not concluded, it will have to be extended until such time that the contracts have been concluded. But Chair, I thought that you would put that into your own communication, perhaps in writing to the department.
That's okay. We can put it in writing as well. Thank you so much. Alex, any last burning questions? If none, thank you so much, Mr. Lewis and Ms. Sopotela. I think you've given us much food for thought, no pun intended. And it's been a wonderful presentation, eye-opening. And I think that as a committee, we realize that we have a lot to do in terms of how do we integrate systems to ensure that we don't have some of these bottlenecks on the ground. I welcome the extent of this program. I know that the program was even running during the COVID periods of making sure that children in schools have something to eat. So we appreciate all the work that is being done by the department in this regard. You are now free to go about your day-to-day activities, should you wish. We will release you from the meeting, and I just ask that the members just remain online, please, so that we are able to deal with some recommendations going forward, and administration of the committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the members.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you to the members. Bye.
Bye. Members, if you have any resolutions, I'm going to take those particular resolutions now. I know we made a number of comments also throughout the presentation, so I'll just ask Ms. Assemusa to also then assist us if we forgot anything. Member Syed, you can go first.
Chair, thank you. And I have texted them to Asima. So the one recommendation is that from my side, that WCED must find a means or give us a proposal as to how to ensure that poor learners in quintiles 4 to 5 schools are also assisted with the feeding scheme. While we do understand the reasons put forward, then the other one is that we need an urgent investigation into the awarding of the contracts, of those contracts which we spoke about. And if needs be, perhaps SCOPA should investigate the awarding of these contracts. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the first one regarding the formula, I completely agree. We do need a formula in this regard for quintile 4 and 5. And I think it would be great for us to ask what would that formula look like? How would we be able to assist the quintile 4 and 5 schools where there are poor learners? In terms of the second one regarding the tender from the one service provider, I think we're jumping the gun a little bit. I think we should first ask for the information, because one asks for an investigation when one has picked up something, and we don't have that written information before us. So with your indulgence, Member Syed, could we ask for the information first and then interrogate that information?
Yeah, but then can we get a time frame in terms of when we can get the information? Yes.
Yes, Ms. Assemusa, how long do we usually give the department for responding to resolutions?
It depends on the items that we are requesting, but as Mr. Lewis has duly noted that in September the contract would come to an end. So some of the questions that we would be asking is, when will it be awarded? Will it be extended? What is the process in the tendering process of it? Is the time acceptable for 2 years of the contract of what Mr. Member Sayed has? We can give them about 2 weeks. I think that would be sufficient because they would be in the process and with that information.
Okay, Member Side, are you happy with 2 weeks? And then Ms. Hassan Musa can use her nice English for the letter.
Yes, I think if we can get it within 2 weeks, but also we can just get exactly what is the exact information we are requesting. Maybe we could just get that clear. Then once we have that, the exact info we're requesting, and then within a 2-week period, we must get the information, and then there must be an investigation once we get the information.
In terms of the investigation, I'm laughing here behind my screen because usually one investigates once one has found something, but we have not found something as yet, which is why I recommended that we get the information first. Because if one says an investigation, it means that you've picked up something in that written information then.
Look, okay, maybe the term investigation may then be the wrong. I think once we get the info, us having the info and looking at it, that in itself is a process of maybe I used the wrong word of investigation.
So you mean basically that the process of getting the written information is also investigation?
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I think I misunderstood you.
And I think we need to get an understanding of what the challenges are that have led to the extension of contract by over 4 years. It's a question that I did raise, and they said that it's better that they send us that. So I think that's important. Thanks.
Yes, okay. So Ms. Hassan Musta, do you have all of that?
Yes, Member Sayed has provided me a text with all the necessary information that he requires. I will just add one more to it, the challenges as well as the criteria with these tenders. What is needed by when and what constitute an extension of the contract. Also, if it is extended, how long is it extended before the new contract?
Instead of the word criteria, you can use the word tender specifications, because you're supposed to put out specifications from your original bid committee. The one that put the bid specification committee is supposed to put the specifications out.
Correct.
Yes.
I'll include that wording instead of criteria. Thank you.
No problem. Member Side, are you happy with that?
Yes.
Perfect. Then I saw another hand. Or did it go down now? Okay, I wanted to find out also, Mr. Lewis did say that it might be good for us to go visit some of the district offices to try and understand some of the challenges in the food logistics. And I do think perhaps that if members are amenable to that, for us to put that on as a future site visit. But I would like to also find out if they could send us the challenges that are being experienced from other provinces that are decentralized. I think that if the department is not necessarily amenable to a framework agreement, if there's no appetite for that, because a framework agreement essentially is you vet different service providers and then they rotate because you've already vetted them, and then everyone essentially gets a turn, those who've been vetted. So if whether they are amenable to a framework agreement regarding the food procurement for the NSMP program, and if not, whether they would consider a pilot for decentralization and focus on those schools that are managed well, and that those pilots are then essentially incentivization for your school being managed well. Because then if the feedback comes back that the pilot is doing well, then it may give us as a committee also more data and evidence whether or not such a system would work in the province. Because it doesn't just help that we ask for decentralization and then we sit with the same problems that other provinces are sitting with. Colleagues, would you be amenable to such a recommendation?
In
Going
agreement,
once.
in agreement, Chair, in agreement.
Perfect, thank you so much. And
Sorry,
I
was
think
muted there, in agreement.
perfect, thank you so much. And then in terms of Ms. Sopotela mentioned that, let me just get the wording correctly. Yeah? She mentioned that, you know, in the provinces where they directly transfer to schools, and it's very difficult regarding the reporting and monitoring not to meet the deadlines. And then the funds are held against the provinces because they are not compliant. And then she also mentioned the fact that previously, in terms of the grant conditions, you were able to have food gardens. So I wanted to find out, because now, though it sounds like those conditions do not exist anymore, you're not allowed to use that money for food gardens anymore. And I wanted to find out whether we could make a recommendation for the next division of revenue adjustment period that the National Department reviews the conditional grant conditions as to the inclusion for those food gardens again. Would members be amenable to such a resolution?
In agreement, Chair.
Okay. And then the last one I had written down here was, it was, what was it now again? Oh, it's when you want to decentralize, it seems as if you would have to take that money from the equitable share and not the grant, which doesn't make sense because it would also go to feeding, and the grant program is for feeding. So the other recommendation I wish for us to make is that if a province, the model that a province decides on, that is the province's choice, but depending on that choice, that you are still able to source that funding from that conditional grant because it's for the exact same purpose. Because otherwise we might run into the situation where we may have a decentralized program that is working, but we don't have money for it because we can't access the national conditional grant because that has specific conditions attached to it. If members understand my logic there. Yes, no, maybe.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. And then the last one is also just stemming from a previous matter that member side also raised. I wanted to ask whether it would be possible for us to invite the National Department of Basic Education to come and speak to us about the possibility of consideration of the review of the quintile system and its current impact it's having on the Western Cape province. I know we made a previous resolution about that as well, and that our dates are quite fully booked in our schedule. But I do think that given the new information that we've received today, that it's we're realizing more and more every day the impact that the current quintile system has, and that we should try and bring that forward. Yes, no, maybe.
Chair, no, that's
Yes,
fine. I just want to, look, if I can remember properly, there's, certain schools, certain numbers must be in the different quintiles, so that is given, and the province then can juggle between the quintiles. I think that's the power the province has, but national determines that's the X amount in quintile 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5. And then people can then appeal to the MEC. So my understanding is, do you want to review the powers that the National Department have on quintiling, going into different quintiles? Is that what you're asking?
So we would first have to hear from them before we could put those type of recommendations together. So my request is that we hear from them on this.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that, Chair.
I saw another purple bubble, but I don't know. Was it member Syed? Was it? I don't know now.
Chair, no. I'm in agreement with that recommendation to have that particular meeting. It's a matter of urgency, actually.
Okay. So thank you so much. Members, are there any other resolutions on this particular topic? Ms. Hassan Musa?
Jay, may I just come in here with regards to that last recommendation? May I just add that we also just provide the members with the last DBE visit from the portfolio committee that happened about 2 years prior to COVID, and circulate those minutes and reports, because the final recommendations that came out of there was to look at the quintile system in the Western Cape and how it affects the schools in the subsidy and the nutrition program. I will request that from DBE as well as the briefing. Also, just to note that the committee had a briefing on the quintile system by DBE in 2019, but maybe a refresher, because the committee members have changed to have that briefing again with that
Perhaps,
report.
yeah. And perhaps the DBE has made progress in this regard going forward since then as well. And also in the budget workshop earlier this year, when National Treasury was presenting the conditional grants to us as part of our money bills research, I do remember them setting out what the different conditional grant criteria was. So perhaps if you can just ask from Ms. Kamish Ahmed if she can forward those to us as well for the I have it, but for the education members, just to make sure that everyone on education have that presentation that they made previously. I think it was now this year, in the beginning of this year. Perfect. And then let me just see here. Okay, if those are all the recommendations for this particular session, I just have some feedback for members. Okay, let me go to the feedback. Let me just open up here. So previously on the 16th of August, am I correct, Ms. Hassan Musa, 16th of August? We resolved we resolved to ask from the Speaker's office just for the letter that Member Syed forwarded, as well as the reply, as well as the guidance, and any legal opinion that such guidance was based on, if any. We also asked that we just asked the department for the dates for the court hearing, and the department also said in the meantime they will also put together a written report for us. So we've asked for all of those type of documentation. And while we're in today's meeting now today, I received a letter from the Speaker's office basically, and I'll ask Ms. Hassan Musa just to forward that because we received it while we were in committee now today, that basically says that the guidance is in general, that we can get the Hansard from the Hansard office, and that the office cannot divulge the correspondence between the Speaker and respective members of Parliament. So my request is, member side, I don't know how confidential the letter is, but it might assist us in our way going forward, given that the Office of the Speaker has now indicated essentially that they're not able to provide that information to us. Would you be able to forward your letter and the response to us, perhaps? Would you be okay with that? I don't know how confidential the letter may or may not be.
You want me to forward the letter that I wrote to the Speaker?
And the response you received.
Yes. No,
if you are okay with it, because we got the letter back to say that the Speaker's office can't send that to us.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Would that be okay with you?
Yeah,
okay.
That's fine.
And then Ms. Hassan Musa, given that I think it's the second paragraph speaks of the Hansard, the only Hansard I have is the draft Hansard for the proceedings, and that's guidance to all members. Is it possible for Hansard to send us the official one? Because I know sometimes they leave a period for edits in the Hansard before they make it official.
So I'll just check the copy I got today, whether that is the official one, and if it is, then I'll forward that to members as well.
Perfect. And then I just want to find out, has the department indicated yet whether they have received dates from the court?
I haven't received dates from the department, but I will also follow up on that. I had emailed them today, so I will just follow up on that, on getting the dates.
Perfect. If they can just, if we can just make sure that they give us those dates. And if you can maybe just also ask the HOD what the timeline is for putting that written report together, so that we have that information, so that we are able to also schedule the briefing.
Will
Ms.
do,
Hassan?
Chair.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Member Syed?
Chair, no, Chair, I understand these processes that, look, we have to now, we're looking for dates, I must send a letter. I don't have a problem, we'll send a letter. But in the meantime, while this is all happening, parents are running around frantically because the children do not have a place for next year. The public have not been taken into confidence as to where are we at the moment, what needs to be done, what they need to do. We don't have answers. And I don't want to say that these are delaying tactics, because I also understand that as a chair, you and even the MEC, they need to be careful as well. They're also taking various considerations into account. But I'm just concerned that we are delaying, and there's going to be too much of a to and fro here, you know. And we are not prohibited, I've said it before, from discussing sub judice matters in the committee, depending on how it's being discussed. But it's fine. I also understand the considerations. I mean, I was just hoping at least as soon as possible, given all these things that we want to get, that we can at least schedule a meeting with the department on this matter. But taking into consideration also all of these things, that we can engage optimally. But at the same time, I don't think we should be delaying consistently.
Thank you. I think what would have assisted us also is if the Office of the Speaker was able to provide us with some of the documentation by now. Unfortunately, I can't make someone give us the respective documentation. I can't force it, but yourself have indicated that you will be able to forward us that respective communication, and I appreciate that. And I think the rest of the committee also appreciates that. In terms of the court dates and the written report, Ms. Hassan Musa will get back to us on those matters. And if anyone in the committee does have parents and communities where there are learners that have not been placed yet, I do encourage you to email the minister or department directly. You're welcome to CC Ms. Hassan Musa as well. We have previously requested from Ms. Hassan Musa just to keep a register for us as a committee as to which matters we send into the department and whether it has been resolved or not resolved and so on, so that we as a committee is also able to keep better track of the complaints that we receive from the public. So my request is then, if you do forward those requests to the minister and or department, that you just please CC Ms. Hassan Musa as well, so that we are also able just to follow up at the end perhaps of each quarter to make sure that those respective matters have been dealt with. That is a sincere request, but we will then look for a briefing date once we have also received some of this extra communication we've previously resolved upon. Ms. Hassan Musa, I see your hand.
Yes, Chair, I'll ask for that information by tomorrow so that members have the court date as well as when they can provide that documentation from the department.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then we'll liaise with the programming authority regarding possible dates. Okay. Anything else, members? I think Ms. Hassan Musa, is that all the feedback I was supposed to give? I just want to make sure that I've gotten all of that.
Yes, the rest of the reports I will distribute tomorrow on Friday for adoption at next week's meeting.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Colleagues, anything else? If none, then I just wish to thank you for being part of this meeting and for engaging robustly within the content. It's not always easy dealing with programs that are so big, but it actually deals with, you know, the basics on the ground. And I really appreciate I appreciate your assistance in trying to ensure that we get as much out of the funding that we possibly can in order to make sure that the children of the Western Cape are able to have food in their tummies when they go to school, and for us to make sure that such is equitable in this regard. I wish you a lovely day further. Stay safe and stay warm. The meeting's adjourned.